In the midst of a fierce snowstorm, a pregnant dog is left alone on an empty road, its survival uncertain. A luxury car speeds through the snowstorm, headlights cutting through the thick swirling white. In the back seat, Bella, a heavily pregnant German shepherd, trembles in fear. But what happens when the car suddenly comes to a halt in the middle of nowhere, and her owner coldly drags her into the freezing snow, leaving her to die? Will Bella survive the night? And who will be the one to change her fate forever? Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. A luxury car speeds down an icy road, its headlights cutting through the thick snowfall. In the back seat, a heavily pregnant German shepherd shivers, her golden brown eyes filled with confusion. Suddenly, the car slows to a stop in the middle of nowhere. The driver steps out, yanks the door open, and drags the dog into the freezing snow. She stumbles, her belly too heavy to run. The man gets back in the car. The door slams. The engine roars. She lunges forward, barking desperately, but the car speeds away, its tail lights fading into the storm. Alone, freezing, pregnant. She won't last long, but miles away, a man is about to change everything. The wind howled through the night, carrying waves of snow across the empty road. The black luxury sedan moves steadily through the storm, its interior warm and comfortable, shielding its driver from the brutal cold outside. In the back seat, Bella, a heavily pregnant German shepherd, lay curled up, her body trembling. The warmth inside the car did little to ease the growing unease in her chest. Something was wrong. Thomas Walker, the man who had raised her since she was a puppy, sat in the driver's seat, his grip tightening around the wheel. His face was emotionless, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Without hesitation, he reached for the door handle and stepped outside. The cold air rushed in, and before Bella could react, the back door swung open. A rough hand grabbed her by the collar, yanking her out of the car and into the freezing snow. She landed awkwardly, her heavy belly making it hard to regain her balance. A sharp gust of wind stung her face, and she looked up at Thomas, her eyes filled with confusion. She let out a soft whimper, her ears flicking back. Why were they stopping here? What was happening? Thomas didn't speak. He simply unfastened her collar and let it drop into the snow. For a long moment, he looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned on his heel and got back into the car. The door slammed shut. Bella took a shaky step forward as the engine roared to life. She barked, a desperate pleading sound. But the tires spun against the ice, kicking up slush as the car sped away. She tried to run after him, her heart pounding in her chest, but her swollen belly made her slow. Her legs struggled against the deep snow, her body already exhausted. Within seconds, the red taillights disappeared into the storm. She stopped, her breath coming in heavy clouds of mist. The world around her was silent except for the wind, the snow quickly bearing the only sign that she had ever been there. She shivered violently, her body unable to generate enough warmth. Her paws ached and her vision blurred as exhaustion set in. She lowered herself onto the frozen ground, her instincts telling her to conserve energy. Her puppies kicked weakly inside her, as if sensing the danger she was in. Her breathing slowed, her body trembled. If she stayed here much longer, she wouldn't survive. Then somewhere in the distance, she heard something, the low rumble of an engine. It was faint at first, barely audible over the wind, but it grew louder, headlights cutting through the swirling snow. A truck skidded to a stop a few feet away, and the driver's door swung open. Heavy boots crunched through the snow, and a man's voice called out, "Hey, stay with me, I got you." Strong arms wrapped around her, lifting her off the frozen ground. She was too weak to struggle, too cold to process what was happening. Then everything went dark. Jack Thompson held the trembling German shepherd tightly in his arms as he rushed toward his truck. Her fur was damp with melting snow, her breathing shallow and her body frighteningly cold. He could feel how unnaturally light she was for a dog carrying a litter of puppies, and that only made his sense of urgency grow. Yanking the passenger door open, he carefully laid her across the seat. "Come on, girl, stay with me," he murmured, turning the heater up to full blast. The warm air rushed over her, but she barely moved. Her golden brown eyes flickered open for a moment, then shut again. Jack's heart pounded as he pulled back onto the icy road. The snowstorm had grown worse, the thick flurries cutting his visibility down to almost nothing. He gripped the wheel tightly, his mind racing. Who would do this? Who would leave a heavily pregnant dog out in this weather to die? The thought made his blood boil. He had seen cases of neglect before. Dogs abandoned when they were no longer convenient. But this was different. This was cruel. Whoever had done this wanted her to die. He pressed harder on the gas, navigating the treacherous roads as fast as he could. His Brookside Animal Clinic wasn't far, but in this storm, every second felt like an eternity. When he finally pulled into the clinic's parking lot, he barely took the time to shut off the engine before jumping out and rushing to the passenger side. He opened the door and reached for the dog. She didn't move. His chest tightened. No, come on, girl," he said under his breath, slipping his arms under her limp body. She let out the faintest whimper as he lifted her, a sound so weak it sent a jolt of fear through him. Moving as quickly as he could, he carried her inside, the clinic's warmth wrapping around him the moment he stepped through the door. The place was dark except for a single dim light near the reception desk. He had closed early because of the storm, but that didn't matter now. He pushed through the swinging doors of the exam room and gently placed the dog onto the padded table. Grabbing a thick blanket, he wrapped it around her shivering body before checking her vitals. Her pulse was faint. Her temperature was dangerously low. She was in the early stages of hypothermia. Jack worked quickly, setting up heating pads around her, rubbing warmth back into her paws, and administering warm fluids to help stabilize her. Time blurred as he moved from one step to the next, fighting to keep her alive. After what felt like an eternity, her breathing finally steadied. She was still weak, but her body wasn't as cold as before. Jack let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand down his face. She wasn't out of danger yet, but at least she had a fighting chance. As he adjusted the blanket around her, she stirred slightly, her ears twitching. A small flicker of hope sparked in his chest. "There you go," he murmured. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" For the first time, her eyes opened fully. She looked at him, tired, weary, but alive. Jack felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just any dog. She had survived something terrible, and she wasn't giving up. A small voice broke the silence. "Uncle Jack." Jack turned toward the door and saw Emily, his 7-year-old niece, standing in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What are you doing up, kiddo?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. Emily's gaze moved to the dog on the table, and her face instantly filled with concern. "Who's that?" Jack sighed. "I found her outside. Someone left her in the snow." Emily's eyes widened. "On purpose?" He nodded. "Yeah, on purpose." Emily moved closer, her small hands gripping the edge of the table as she studied the dog. "She looks really sick." "She is," Jack admitted, "but I think she's going to be okay." Emily hesitated for a moment before reaching out, her tiny fingers brushing against the dog's fur. "She's pretty," she whispered. "What's her name?" Jack glanced at the dog, then back at his niece. "I don't know." Emily tilted her head. "Can I name her?" Jack chuckled softly. "Let's see if she makes it through the night first, okay?" Emily nodded, but she didn't take her eyes off the dog. She stood there for a long time, watching as the German shepherd's breathing slowly evened out. Finally, she spoke again. "She looks like a Sam." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Sam?" Emily nodded. "Yeah, she just looks like a Sam." Jack glanced down at the sleeping dog and felt something settle in his chest. Sam. It suited her, and if Emily had already named her, there was no way they were letting her go. Jack sat beside the exam table, his fingers absent-mindedly running through Sam's fur as she slept. The clinic was quiet, the hum of the heater filling the space with a steady warmth. Outside, the storm raged on, the wind howling against the windows. It had been hours since he had brought her in, and though her body was no longer ice-cold, she was still weak. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He had done everything he could for now. Heated blankets, IV fluids, and a safe space to rest. But hypothermia wasn't the only danger she faced. She was still carrying a litter of puppies, and her body had been pushed to its limits. If her condition worsened, she might not have the strength to deliver them. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor beside the table, watching Sam intently. "She's breathing better," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Yeah, but she's not out of the woods yet." Emily reached out carefully, resting her small hand on Sam's paw. "She's gonna be okay. I just know it." Jack wished he could be as sure as Emily was. He wanted to believe that Sam was strong enough to pull through, but he had seen dogs in far better condition lose their fight. The thought of it made his stomach twist. A sudden knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Who would be coming here in the middle of a storm? "Stay here with her," he told Emily, as he stood up and made his way toward the front. When he opened the door, a sharp gust of wind blew inside, sending a chill through the clinic. Standing on the porch, bundled in a thick coat, was Deputy David Miller. His patrol car was idling in the driveway, its headlights illuminating the snow-covered ground. "Jack," David greeted, shaking snow from his hat. "Didn't expect to see your lights on this late." Jack crossed his arms. "Something tells me this isn't a social visit," David sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I heard you picked up a dog tonight, a pregnant German Shepherd." Jack stiffened. "Word travels fast. A truck driver reported seeing a black sedan dump a dog on the side of the road before taking off. When I went to check it out, all I found were paw prints and tire tracks leading into the woods." Jack's jaw tightened. "She would have frozen to death out there." David nodded. "Yeah, that's why I need to know. Are you keeping her?" Jack narrowed his eyes. "Why?" David hesitated before answering. "Because if her owner comes looking for her, you know how this works. If he has proof she belongs to him, legally, she's his." Anger flared in Jack's chest. "You're telling me that the same person who left her to die in a snowstorm could just show up and take her back?" David exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't like it either, but I don't make the laws." Jack clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. "She doesn't have a collar," he said, his voice firm. "No tags, no microchip. Far as I'm concerned, she's a stray." David sighed. "Look, I'm not saying someone's gonna come knocking on your door tomorrow, but if they do, you'd better be prepared to fight for her." Jack didn't hesitate. "I will." David studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, just wanted to give you a heads up." He glanced toward the back of the clinic. "How's she doing?" "She's stable for now," Jack replied, "but she's been through hell, and she's got a litter of puppies on the way." David's expression softened. "Then I hope she's got some fight left in her." "She does." Emily's voice piped up from behind them. Both men turned to see the little girl standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "Sam's a fighter," she said firmly, "and she's staying here." David smiled slightly. "Looks like you've already got yourself a guard dog." Jack gave a small chuckle, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Yeah, looks like I do." David tipped his hat. "I'll check in on you guys in the morning. Stay warm." With that, he stepped back into the storm and made his way to his patrol car. Jack watched as the vehicle disappeared into the night before shutting the door. Emily turned to him with a determined look. "We're not letting anyone take her, right?" Jack crouched down to her level. "Not a chance." Emily grinned and ran back to Sam's side. Jack followed, his gaze settling on the sleeping dog. She had survived so much already, and he was going to make sure she never had to fight alone again. Morning arrived with a sky heavy with gray clouds, the storm finally beginning to settle. The world outside was blanketed in thick snow, untouched and peaceful. But inside Jack's clinic, the tension was anything but calm. Sam was still weak, but she was awake now, her golden brown eyes following Jack's every move as he checked her vitals. She was improving, but her body had been through too much, and Jack was still worried. The real test would come when she gave birth. Emily sat beside Sam, gently stroking her fur. "She's looking better," she said hopefully. Jack nodded. "She is, but we still have to be careful. She's not out of danger yet." As if sensing their conversation was about her, Sam let out a deep breath and nuzzled against Emily's small hand. Jack's lips twitched into a small smile. She trusted them now. That was a good sign. The moment of peace was short-lived. A sharp knock at the clinic door sent a jolt through Jack. He exchanged a glance with Emily before standing up. "Stay here," he said firmly. As he made his way to the front, his gut twisted with unease. He wasn't expecting anyone, and after what David had warned him about last night, he had a bad feeling about this. When he opened the door, his suspicion was confirmed. Standing outside, dressed in a long black coat, was Thomas Walker. Jack recognized him immediately, a well-known businessman, rich and powerful, with a reputation for being ruthless. And right now, his sharp blue eyes were scanning Jack with barely concealed impatience. "Dr. Thompson," Thomas greeted, his voice smooth but cold. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Jack's jaw tightened. "I don't think so." Thomas exhaled as if he were already annoyed. "Let's not make this difficult. My dog ran off yesterday. A German Shepherd, pregnant. I was told a vet brought one in last night." Jack's blood boiled at the lie. "Your dog didn't run off. She was dumped in the middle of a snowstorm and left to die." Thomas barely reacted, only tilting his head slightly. "Is that what you think happened?" "I know that's what happened," Jack shot back. "She was hypothermic when I found her. If I had been any later, she wouldn't have survived." Thomas sighed, his expression one of forced patience. "Look, I don't have time for a debate. I own that dog, and I'm here to take her back." Jack's hands curled into fists. He had expected something like this, but facing it head-on made his anger rise to the surface. "You don't deserve her," he said, his voice low. Thomas's lips pressed together. "I don't need your opinion, Doctor Thompson. I just need my property." "She's not property," Jack snapped. "She's a living being, and she's not going anywhere with you." For the first time, Thomas's mask of indifference cracked. His jaw tensed. "I could have the sheriff here in an hour," he warned. "I have papers proving she belongs to me." Jack didn't flinch. "You had her ID removed, didn't you? No collar, no tags, no microchip." "Convenient," Thomas smirked slightly. "Smart, isn't it?" Jack took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "If you had any real interest in her well-being, you wouldn't have left her out there to die." "I had my reasons," Thomas said simply. "And they don't concern you." "They do now," Jack countered, "because she's under my care, and unless you have a court order, you're not getting anywhere near her." Thomas's eyes darkened. "You don't want to start a fight you can't win, Doctor Thompson." Jack stood his ground. "Try me." For a moment, neither man moved. Then Thomas gave a cold chuckle. "Fine," he said, turning back toward his sleek black car. "I'll be back." Jack watched as he stepped inside and drove away, the tires kicking up snow as he vanished down the road. He knew this wasn't over. Taking a deep breath, he shut the door and turned back toward the exam room. Emily stood there wide-eyed. Was that her old owner? Jack nodded. Emily frowned. "You're not going to let him take her, right?" Jack knelt in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Not a chance," he promised. Emily looked relieved, but Jack knew this was only the beginning. He had just made an enemy of one of the richest men in town, and Thomas Walker wasn't the type to give up easily. The wind outside had picked up again, rattling the windows of the clinic as Jack paced the exam room. His mind was still spinning from his confrontation with Thomas Walker earlier that morning. He knew men like Thomas. Powerful, entitled, used to getting what they wanted. Jack had no doubt that he would come back, and when he did, he wouldn't be alone. But right now, that wasn't the most urgent problem. Sam was in trouble. She had spent most of the day resting, but as night fell, her breathing had become more labored, her body trembled, and she whined softly, shifting uncomfortably. Jack had been monitoring her closely, and now, as he gently placed his hands on her belly, his stomach clenched. It was time. She was going into labor. "Emily," Jack called, keeping his voice calm. His niece, who had been curled up in a chair beside Sam, jumped up immediately. "What's wrong?" "She's having the puppies," he said. "I need you to grab some towels from the cabinet." Emily's eyes widened, but she nodded quickly and rushed across the room. Jack turned back to Sam, running a soothing hand along her side. "You're okay, girl." "You're safe," he murmured. Sam let out a sharp exhale, her body tensing as the first contraction hit. Jack had delivered litters before, but this was different. Sam was weak from everything she had been through, and the stress of her near-death experience could complicate the birth. She needed all the strength she had left to get through this. Emily hurried back, her arms full of towels. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Jack gave her a reassuring nod. "Just stay close. I might need your help." Minutes passed, then an hour. Sam worked through the labor with quiet determination, but Jack could see how much it was taking out of her. Finally, the first puppy arrived, a tiny squirming bundle, wet and fragile. Jack quickly dried it off, clearing its nose and mouth before placing it close to Sam. She immediately nudged it closer, her motherly instincts kicking in despite her exhaustion. Emily let out a breath of relief. "One down," she whispered, but they weren't finished yet. Sam let out a low whine as another contraction hit. One by one, the puppies came. 2, 3, 4. Each one was smaller than Jack would have liked, but they were alive. Then something went wrong. Sam strained, her body tense, but no new puppy appeared. Jack's heart pounded. A breech birth. "Come on, girl. You can do this," he murmured, carefully feeling along her belly. The last puppy was stuck. He had to act fast. "Emily, stay right here," he said as he moved quickly to get his equipment. Emily nodded, her hands clasped together, watching anxiously. Jack worked with precision, helping guide the last puppy out as gently as possible. Sam let out a weak yelp, but then the final puppy slipped free, but it wasn't moving. Jack's chest tightened as he grabbed a towel and began rubbing the tiny body. "Come on," he whispered. Nothing. He rubbed harder, clearing the tiny nose, massaging its tiny chest. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is it?" "No," Jack said firmly. He wasn't giving up. Then a tiny gasp. The puppy twitched, then let out a small, fragile cry. Jack exhaled sharply, a wave of relief washing over him as he placed the newborn beside Sam. She immediately pulled it close, licking its tiny body. Emily clapped her hands together. "You did it," Jack smiled tiredly. "Sam did it." Emily knelt beside the exhausted mother. "She's so strong," she whispered, gently brushing her fingers over one of the puppies. Jack sat back, running a hand down his face. It had been a long, tense night, but against all odds, Sam and her puppies had made it. But just as he allowed himself to relax, a loud knock echoed through the clinic. Emily flinched. "Who is that?" Jack's expression darkened. He had a feeling he already knew. He stood up, his body tense. "Stay with Sam," he told Emily. As he made his way to the front, the knocking grew louder. He took a deep breath and opened the door. Thomas Walker stood there, flanked by 2 men in suits. "I told you I'd be back," Thomas said smoothly. "And this time, I'm not leaving without my dog." Jack stood in the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides. The cold wind howled behind Thomas Walker, snow swirling around his polished shoes. The 2 men standing beside him, bodyguards most likely, remained still, their unreadable gazes locked on Jack. Thomas smirked slightly, as if already claiming victory. "I assume you know why I'm here." Jack's voice was steady. "I told you yesterday, she's not yours anymore." Thomas sighed, stepping closer. "Let's cut the theatrics, Doctor." Thompson. "I have legal documents proving ownership. That dog, my dog, was bred from an expensive bloodline. You think I'm just going to let you keep her?" Jack felt his pulse quicken with anger. "You abandoned her. You left her in the middle of a blizzard, pregnant, freezing to death. That's not ownership. That's neglect." Thomas's expression remained cold. "I had my reasons." "I don't give a damn about your reasons," Jack shot back. "She's safe now. She's staying here." Thomas let out a slow, measured breath. "I was hoping we could settle this quietly, but if you insist on being difficult..." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. "I have legal proof of ownership. If you refuse to hand her over, I'll have the sheriff here within the hour. And trust me, I have friends in high places." Jack stared at the papers in Thomas's hand, his stomach twisting. He knew how the law worked. Technically, if Thomas had documentation proving Sam was his, there wasn't much Jack could do. Unless... He exhaled sharply and folded his arms. "You can take me to court if you want," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "But you won't win." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Jack stepped forward. "I had a sheriff's deputy here last night. I told him everything. That Sam was dumped in a snowstorm, that she was suffering from hypothermia when I found her, that she could have died if I hadn't brought her here." Thomas's jaw tightened ever so slightly. Jack continued, "And now? She's not just a stray anymore. She's a mother. Those puppies back there? They don't belong to you. They were born under my care, and I have full documentation of that." He narrowed his eyes. "So go ahead. Call the sheriff. But when I tell them how you left her out there to die, you'll be the one under investigation." For the first time, Thomas's confidence wavered. He glanced at his bodyguards, then back at Jack. "You think this is over?" he muttered. "I know it's over," Jack said firmly. A long silence stretched between them. Then, without another word, Thomas snapped the folder shut, turned on his heel, and strode back toward his car. His bodyguards followed, and within moments, the sleek black vehicle disappeared into the storm. Jack let out a slow breath, releasing the tension that had been coiling inside him. It was over. He turned back inside and shut the door, locking it behind him. Emily was sitting beside Sam when Jack returned to the exam room. The mother dog was curled around her tiny puppies, her golden brown eyes watching him with quiet trust. Emily looked up. "He's gone," Jack nodded. "Yeah, he won't be coming back." A slow smile spread across Emily's face. "So she's really ours now?" Jack crouched beside Sam, running a gentle hand along her head. "Yeah," he said softly. "She's home now." Emily let out a happy squeal and gently stroked one of the puppies. "Can we name them?" Jack chuckled. "I think that's a great idea." Emily grinned. "Okay, this one looks like a Max, and this one is Daisy." As she continued naming each tiny pup, Jack sat back, watching the scene unfold before him. Sam had been left to die in the snow. She had suffered. She had almost lost everything. But now she had a family, she had a future, and she would never be abandoned again. Sam's journey is proof that love, resilience, and second chances can change everything. The story of the pregnant dog abandoned in the snowstorm is not just a testament to the strength and resilience of animals, but also a powerful lesson about love and compassion. When this dog was left to die in the cold, many might have given up on her, but it was the unwavering determination of kind-hearted individuals that changed her fate, providing her with love and a new home. Her puppies, born into warmth and care, remind us of a simple truth. Life, no matter how harsh the circumstances, can still find the light. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. By doing so, you'll never miss out on more touching stories, heartwarming moments, and valuable life lessons. Let's spread love and kindness together, creating a world where every day is filled with compassion and hope. Subscribe now and join us on this journey of discovering more meaningful and inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.